What's up, everybody, and welcome back. We're back here with another edition of this podcast, and we're 6 days away from the premiere of the Challenge All Stars. I don't know if we're even calling it Season 5 anymore, because now it just says the Challenge All Stars -Rivals, but we'll call it 5 because it's basically 5. But yeah, we're getting a rival season. If you saw our last video, we basically power ranked every rivals pairing on paper heading into the season and gave our thoughts in brief on what we thought about the pairs being put together. But to kind of bounce off of that, we're actually going to be talking about a potential All-Star 6 if it were to be Exes, because, you know, All-Stars is going to keep going seemingly, and what better way to continue this off-season talk and kill some time for another week while we still have to by talking about Exes. So without further ado, what is your feelings now coming into this, talking about an Exes season? Where does Exes kind of land for you on the mark when it comes to the franchise and looking back at it?
I think that Exes is one of the most exciting formats because people really love when the cast has history. I think that there's a certain allure to that you don't have with a theme like Double Agents or War of the Worlds. Like, that's just made up shit. No one cares about that. But when you have Exes, assuming you have a decent cast, like, it is really fun to see how these people will interact with each other. And we are long overdue for another true installment of the Exes franchise, to the point that we have tons and tons of potential pairings that we could look into.
Yeah, it's now that you mention it that way, it kind of now I don't know if I've ever talked about this in this sense, but I kind of feel like a reason and maybe why people like Exes so much is it because it almost feels like production would be rewarding their audience for sticking around in a sense, because for those that have seen the maybe Exes pairings that are put together, they would have watched those two together throughout like their time on the show, and like, you know, to kind of see them come full circle and have to be paired up with each other would almost be rewarding the audience in a sense for sticking around, whereas like we don't get that same attachment to somebody that is from like Germany's like got talent and we don't know like who they are, right? Like there's not the same level of attachment, whereas like, you know, if you're coming back for a sitcom or something the following week after the previous week's episodes, you want to feel like, you know, what's the continuation going to be and what's the character development going to be? How are these two people going to interact? So yeah, and you said it best, Exes is kind of long overdue, so much so to the point that like out of all like the Exes and Rivals seasons, I might be willing to say that Exes 2 might be my favorite out of all of them.
Yeah, I love Exes too. Now, I don't know if it's necessarily because of the format or just the people on there, but I really think Exes would adapt well to the All Stars franchise, because we don't have to have like any of those pairs that are rookies and debuts and no one cares about them. You know, when they were coming from the real world, people had attachment. You know, when we had Dustin and Heather, even though they weren't Exes at the time, people care about them. No one cares about kids coming from Are You the One? Or, you know, now we would have people coming from, I don't know, like two random people that hooked up on The Voice Belgium. Like, no one cares. But with All Stars, we've already seen them on the main franchise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Exes, I mean, we've gotten like, I guess to a certain extent, it does feel like with Final Reckoning and then now this, which kind of had included some pairs of Exes, it does feel like production internally maybe doesn't value Exes as much as they do Rivals, with the little amount of Exes pairs that we have had on like the for instance, on Final Reckoning, like Hunter and Ashley was technically an exes pair, and they won. But outside of them, what was the other exes pair? I mean, we had Britni and Chuck.
Cory and Derek.
Cory and Derek. So we had, I think that might have been it, if I remember correctly.
Well, I don't remember any other ones either. So if there were other ones, they weren't memorable enough.
Yeah, so it was like maybe 3 pairs compared to like the 12 or 13 other ones that were rivals. And then on this, I mean, which is not intended on being an exes season, in all fairness, has 2 sets of exes on it. So, maybe it does feel like production tends to lean and gravitate towards rivals more so than exes, or maybe it's just tough these days with people growing up and like having families and dynamics changing. But that's not why we're here today. We're here to talk about a world in which exes does happen to be a potential future All-Star 6, because if it's going to happen, it has to happen now. If we keep waiting, it might not ever happen. So we each compiled sets of pairs that we're going to be talking about, and we tried to follow the model of how they did it with the 13 pairs, except we decided to go 14 just to give it an even number of teams. And so, yeah, we're going to basically be running down our pairings for an All-Stars Exes season. And, yeah, I'm hoping that ours are vastly different from one another, or at least different in some regard. I'm interested to see yours because I think you have an old school mind, and I tend to lean old school too. But I think when you see my pairings, they're going to kind of feel like a little bit more new, on the newer side than old. But then again, with how the franchise is seemingly taking the direction and leaning into newer on All-Stars with this season, it's probably not too out of the realm of possibility to assume that might be the way they go. But yeah, anyways, if we want to do it, I could go list a pair, you can go list a pair, and then we'll just bounce back and forth. So
works for me.
I guess I'll kick it off with one that would be very highly sought after if I was casting this show myself. And this is one that I feel like they're both moved on. However, the TV that they made together unintentionally was great, and then was one of the bigger focal points of probably the first quarter of Final Reckoning. And that's Brad and Britni. I think that, Britni tends to be one of those cast members that, absence makes the heart grow fonder, I think. Maybe in real time when the show was first happening, like the Dirty 30 through Final Reckoning era when she was on, maybe fans didn't really appreciate her as much. But now that like years have gone on, I think you've seen fans kind of come out of the woodwork a little bit more, and like on their binge watches have come around to Britni and been like, I would take her in comparison to some of the newer people we get today. And then for me personally, I mean, I've been on record to say that Vendetta's Final Reckoning Brad is like one of my favorite male cast members to have ever exist in any form, because they kind of were so well-rounded as just a reality TV cast member, with like unintentionally just being like a train wreck, but also like competing well. So yeah, and the last we saw them, they weren't like on the greatest of terms, let's just say. So I think that this would be pretty messy to see unfold. But yeah, that's my first pairing. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I had them on my list, so yeah.
Oh, okay, good. So yeah, we could yeah.
Sorry.
Oh no. No, do you think yeah, go ahead. No,
I think that in the modern era of the challenge, we're going to start seeing this archetype of the midlife crisis. Someone coming back that gets the call, and Brad on Vendettas and Final Reckoning is basically the template for that. Because his midlife crisis, as Zach called it, was pretty epic. And I think Britni played a big part of that. Now, I do agree with you that absence makes the heart grow fonder for people like Britni. Don't tell her that, because she will use that to promote her OnlyFans and not come on the show. We want her to come on the show. However, if she is unavailable because she has other business endeavors, I guess I'll take Brad and Emily because they just have like a thing.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense too, and I could see like from a personal standpoint, I go Britni because I think it would just be more entertaining. However, I will say, as selfishly, one of Brad's probably my favorite male cast member. I think actually, so selfishly, if they did go him and Emily, I would be happy for him because I think that he would stand a very good chance of getting his second win, and that would actually be Emily's second win too, if you don't count Champ Stars. So, but yeah, I'm going Brad and Britni from an entertainment standpoint. The wins could wait. I need the good television. So. Yeah, and I guess that'll count as yours too, since we had the same one. So I'll just go again with my next one, and then if you have that same one, then we'll just keep checking them off. I got a more so the male on this team is anything but modern. He's been around since I was in diapers at this point, but it's a modern pairing in the sense of how recent their X development is, and I actually have Bananas and Moriah. Now, the question is whether or not Bananas will do a season with Moriah. I don't think Moriah is necessarily clamoring for this. However, I don't think Moriah is too afraid of going on a season with Bananas. I think it's more so Bananas and whether or not he would do the season or not. And he would have heavy intel on what the theme would be and like who's going and whatnot. So this would totally fall entirely on him whether or not this were to happen, but it is very realistic that it could happen if both say yes. I mean, Bananas is going to get calls until he's in the grave, and Moriah, I think they would definitely want this to happen. And honestly, it'd be a pretty good underrated team competitively if Bananas and her could actually work together. But yeah, that's who I got next. So.
I did have them as well. I think when you're casting for Exes, you're always going to have a couple of teams that are almost essential to making the format work. Exes 1 would have been nothing without CT and DM. And Exes 2, CT and DM, again, were the big grab. They lured people in. And then there are some pairings that are just kind of obvious, like you ought to have them. They're not make or break for the show, but like on Exes 2, I would say Knight and Jemmy and Johnny and Avery. Like those were, you knew, if you were into the franchise, you knew those people. And I think that Bananas and Moriah, even though they were only together for like a year, it was kind of a big thing for viewers when it was going on. So it would almost be an oversight to not have them. However, I would love to see Bananas and Natalie Negrati. Yeah. I actually remembered her name, but I like to pretend that I forget about it because people just do that. But I would love to see her make her comeback. Long overdue. Obviously, she would win, but I think Moriah is more front of mind.
Mm-hmm. Well, Bananas has actually got quite a few intriguing options. There's obviously Morgan, but that's a snowball's chance in hell of happening. Yeah. Yeah, I think he would have a few options. It would totally. Now, actually, I think if you were to ask Bananas and to tier rank, like out of those three, who would you rather go on a season with and be paired in an Exes season? He would go Natalie, big drop off Moriah, and then a massive drop off Morgan, just in terms of like personal dynamics, because the Morgan and him thing was obviously is and continues to still be a mess to this day. And then obviously he's like, sour about the Moriah thing, but Natalie and him, I think, would actually have no problems doing a season with each other at this point.
I agree with that.
For my next one, this is another new one, and I feel like this is another one of the essential teams, similarly to Bananas and Moriah, and that's Fessy and Amanda. It definitely felt like this one had legs to it a couple years ago when they met on Spies, Lies, and Allies, and it did feel like Amanda actually did have genuine feelings for him, and I'm sure he did for her as well, but, you know, well, yeah, true. Maybe not, actually.
No.
Yeah, they were just in very two different places in their lives, clearly. Like, Amanda wanted a guy serious, and Fessy was just kind of living that, like, single guy life, you know, reality TV, hook up with every girl type of situation. But again, this would be the spiritual successor to Zach and Amanda, if we're just talking competitively. From the Final Reckoning pairing, and I think this would be a fun little duo. So that's who I have on here.
So I did not have that pairing. Of course, Amanda is always on my cast. I always cast Amanda. I put her with Joss.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, they had their thing during Final Reckoning. I don't think if Amanda and Joss were a pairing, I don't think we would hear a single word from Joss all season. Amanda would say everything on that team. I don't think it would be a high drama team, but I think that they would work well together and almost be like a yin and yang situation. Amanda is pretty good at a lot of the challenges, especially the daily challenges, and she doesn't really get like the recognition for it. But I think with Joss, they would like almost like she was with Zach, be an exemplary team, and they would be winning.
I think that would be like a better version of Sylvia and Joss from Final Reckoning. Well, I mean, depends on what version of better you're talking about. I think Amanda's a bit better than I think Amanda's a bit better than Sylvia when it comes to like puzzles and like mental stuff, because Amanda's deceptively smart, and maybe a little bit better endurance wise. But Sylvia's obviously a better physical competitor than Amanda, so it really just depends on what you would look at it like. But yeah, they'd be another good pairing. I actually like that a lot. My next pairing, it has more to do with getting the guy back, and this isn't me shading the girl in any way, shape, or form, but we've seen her a plenty amount of time, and we're going to be seeing her again next week. So more or less just kind of about getting the guy on. I got Hunter and Nany. So they had a little thing that on War of the Worlds 1, and then like at the reunion, it got a little messy-ish when Nany brought up the fact that Hunter had a kid on the way, and like it got shut down really quickly. But like you could tell it was like there was something there like that was a little bit like hostile at the reunion. Like you could tell like Nany felt hostility on her end, and Hunter was like obviously trying to hide the fact that he had a kid on the way, and there was some just like kind of awkward tension there. And that was just kind of it. We never really saw anything else play out after the fact. Hunter hasn't been back, and Nany went on to do several seasons after that. She met Casey. They're obviously together still and they're already engaged, I think, right?
Allegedly. There have been some rumors circulating.
It's quite fitting that we're having this conversation now, but yeah, no, I would go Hunter and Nany here. Why the hell not?
I actually have them as well. I think that's a good pairing in terms of strength and maybe helping Nany do well on a season.
The only thing that I fear is like from a competitive standpoint, Hunter would definitely provide her with like a physical like guy that could like, carry that burden. I don't really, their mental game, I kind of feel like under pressure would suck, because like Nany's like kind of easily frazzled in high pressure situations, and then like Hunter's obviously about as intelligent as a bag of dog shit. So, there goes that interview.
And I don't mean this in a disrespectful way to anyone, which of course means I'm going to say something disrespectful, but I think Hunter is the worst at puzzles I've ever seen on the show.
Worse than Nicole Zanata?
Yeah. I mean, she gives him competition, but I just don't think he has a snowball's chance in hell when you give him like a little jigsaw puzzle to do.
Well, here you go. You're on record now. Worst puzzle guy in history.
Yeah. At least I think he knows it.
The thing with this pairing, though, I don't think it would be much of internal drama as far as like their past goes, because it's just water under the bridge now. There might be drama in terms of like differences with how they want to play the game, and that what might be interests me the most. Like if Hunter's a hothead and gets into fights, and not similar to what we're about to see with Nany and Turbo. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's funny because the last time we saw Hunter on War of the Worlds 1, he was kind of doing his own thing, saying a lot of really controversial and divisive things during the tribunal, or whatever they called the 3 winning teams.
Yeah.
And he almost fit into the archetype that Turbo is being placed into now, where he's just a complete train wreck hothead. So maybe Nany has the skills to rein Hunter in and make it work. If that's the Hunter we got.
Next up, I had to go with an old school team since we've been having a lot of newer stuff. And allegedly, this is like total for those that have followed the franchise. This is fan service to the max, and this is just like one of those like this is like if Jay-Z and Beyonce showed up on a cast. There's like the challenge Jay-Z and Beyonce to some extent here. No, it's not Danny and Melinda. I got Trishelle and Steven from Vegas because apparently we got pretty dangerously close to seeing them paired up together on this current season that's just happening. So I went with them for this. This is more or less like fan service kind of, here's for sticking around with us all this time, like type of thing.
Yeah, I would love to see both of them. I think it would be very interesting to see Steven back because we haven't seen him in a long time. And as much as I joke about the slap with him and Shane, he got done dirty there. There was no need to send him home.
Hey, listen, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. If they bring him back, they might need to have him in a straitjacket for 20 hours of the day. All right.
Yeah. I'd take it because I want to see like an old school return. I also have an old school hookup on my list, but it's not, at this point, it would not be much of anything. It's almost fan service just to have old school people come back. Mm-hmm. And I put Mark and Jodi from the Gauntlet 2.
Okay. Yeah.
I almost put Jodi and Adam, who also, Mark and Jodi.
Yeah.
I forget when their hookup actually took place.
Jodi and Adam was on the Gauntlet. That was during Joe's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when Jodi and Adam were, but Mark and Jodi.
Oh, Mark,
before the Gauntlet. I can't really remember.
I think Mark and Jodi happened. Did that happen off the show or did it happen on the show?
I don't know.
But it was a focal point during Gauntlet too.
Yes, I remember the whole bus incident with Mark happened because of the Mark and Jodi hookup. So I think that they would be a fun pair because they're an older team, but there's a lot of potential there. They were both on Era 1 this season. They both went home really early on season 40. So to have them back seems like they'd be put in a good position to excel if ever there was a good position for them to excel.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going with another old school pairing here. This one could be considered a little bit more tongue in cheek, a little more loose, but they've not shied away in the past from leaning into, flirtmances as justification for rivals. And I've got Nehemiah and Beth here. I feel like it classifies. I don't care. I'm putting them here.
Now, everyone knows that this is not a real hookup. There's definitely like the flirtmans, tenderoni, mumbo jumbo that happened, but I'm a fan of having both of them on the show. Do I think that this is going to be a winning pairing? No. But Beth always delivers when she's on the show, so give her one episode and she'll give you 10 storylines.
I'm curious to see, because Nehemiah is very zen and calm. Like, with being attached to somebody like Beth, that tends to drive your partner's blood pressure through the roof. How zen of a version of Nehemiah are we going to get? Yeah.
So I also had an old school pairing, but the whole backstory about this pairing is more recent, and I put from the real world New Orleans, Jamie and Julie, which if you watched Homecoming, they had a little storyline together where Julie talked about her prior relationship with Jamie and how Jamie might have swiped her V card. So there's definitely history there, but they both seem to be kind of cool with each other. So I think that they would be game to compete together. I know Julie wanted, at least at one point, to come back. She was really gung-ho and eager to do another challenge season. But eventually she got called for Homecoming and she thought she was going to go on the challenge. There's some backstory to it that's not entirely clear to me. Regardless, I think that this pair would be a lot of fun. However, I don't see either of their spouses, significant others, really wanting them to go and work together on the show.
Yeah, that was actually the thought crossed my mind of putting them together, but that's mainly the big pushback on why I didn't do it. It's just because I was like, I don't know if this is going to be necessarily the most comfortable thing, but then again, uncomfortableness makes for great television. So, it's probably good that you had it and I didn't, though. It's good that we didn't have all the same ones.
It's true.
I'll go with another one, and I don't know if this would necessarily classify as old school, but we're technically further away from this relationship than we are closer to it. So for the nature of this conversation, I'll refer to it as a more older school pairing, and it's two people we have not seen for quite some time. And this is kind of a shot in the dark, but it's all-stars, and we've seen crazier things happen. So I'm going with Jenn and Pete.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see it. I think Jen's pregnant right now, so I don't think it's going to happen soon, but you never know. Jen's also keeping in good shape, so she has the baby. She can just come right back to the challenge. No worries. But yeah, I would love to see that one.
It would be great because Pete's obviously, and if you've seen in recent years any photos of him leak on the internet, he also got like crazy jacked himself. He went to like the army or something like that, and is like just a complete like just house now.
I love how you say that these photos leaked online. They like were posted. He posted them. Like,
yeah, he posted them, but I don't know. I mean, like I say leaked because it's like fans like posting them online, like on Twitter. So they're not leaks, but they're like I don't even know what you'd call them. But like you get the point. Like Pete's not, unless Pete's on a burner. Like, oh, look at this photo of Pete. Like that'd be a different story. But no, I'm pretty sure he posted them. But my point still stands. I think there would be. I think their biggest fallback would probably, or drawback would possibly be maybe that they're not super connected. But hey, I mean, somebody would have to go in and take them out, and they'd be a tough team, I think, currently with how they both are keeping themselves. Did you have your next pairing now?
So one pairing that is a little bit on the older side, I don't think it's actually going to happen, but I would love to see it happen. And I actually don't think the two people on this team would hate working with each other. But I would love to see Sarah and Alton come back. They had their little moment on Battle of the Seasons, which was right after Exes won. And I know that we've had Alton come back for All Stars 1, so he's not completely out of the picture. Sarah, I think we have a hard time getting her to come back, but if ever she were to come back, it would be for a shorter filming window, which is All Stars.
Yeah, I like that one. I actually do have Alton on my cast as well, but I have him with Jisela. Again, I think this one's another one where they weren't ever officially dating. However, for I would say the first, like, correct me if I'm wrong, that first year post All-Star 1, we would always see Jisela tweeting and posting things of conversations between her and Alton on like Twitter or something. Like, so they were definitely still talking or seeing things through with one another after All Stars 1, but then things kind of seemingly went cold. And from, connecting the dots, it kind of feels like Alton might have ghosted her.
Yeah, I don't know the exact details of that relationship. I think that it was one of those situations where distance was just the biggest barrier. But that's why it was never an official relationship as well. But it would be an interesting one to see, because Jisela was a very interesting return on All Stars 1, and I feel like she would bring a good storyline if she came back again.
She's definitely one of those long overdue returns as well. She was kind of like, you could argue, main character to an extent on All Star 1, or at least a huge supporting role.
Oh yeah, I not to like self promote, but I have a list of the main character of every single season, and Jisela is my main character for All Star 1.
Who would be your All Star 2? Would you put Ayanna?
Nehemiah.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, true.
He definitely was. He was the star of the show that season.
I'll go with another one of mine here. So this one, not necessarily. So there wouldn't be any issue with the two people particularly that I have paired up here involved, but the specific nature surrounding their thing that they had on this season would kind of make it a little bit of a touchy subject, a bit, mostly due to the third party involved. But I'm just gonna go ahead and put them together anyway, just because. I got Cara, Maria, and Thomas. We obviously know the surrounding details regarding like Abram, and the sheer nature of this like hookup / showmance or whatever is kind of like a dicey situation. And then Abram's had his own issues in the recent years with like his, baby mama or whatever, which we're not going to get into, but it's kind of even more so shed a bit of like a dark cloud on that whole bloodlines scenario, where people look back at it. I mean, it was probably uncomfortable for people in the moment when it first aired, but it's probably even more so uncomfortable now given everything that's happened. But, considering they were able to edit people out of seasons and act like people don't exist, I'm sure that they could like frame this in a way to where they don't have to acknowledge that people were cheated on and Abram was involved. They could just say that, oh yeah, we were on Bloodlines together, we kissed a couple times, and then we're partnered up.
Yeah, I don't think that using that as the basis for an Exes pairing, which we know that Exes is very loose in production's eyes, but the initial incident, whatever you want to call it, apparently nothing really happened, but regardless of what did or did not happen, the canoodling occurred before Abram even got into the house. So there's like real footage from Johnny Banana's GoPro of Cara Maria giving Thomas an alleged like over the pants hand job or some shit in the backseat of the bus. That's all pre-Abram. So we can definitely rationalize that. I thought about putting this pairing on there because a part of me is like, it's not real. But then a part of me is like, well, like if you were in a relationship and your girlfriend was like going to be on a teammate with someone that they were rumored to have hooked up with, you probably wouldn't like it.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some tension there because of these rumors, but I also think that they would just work well together.
Mm-hmm. Do you have another pairing that you would like to throw out there?
Sure. So I have one that I think now would be completely fine to have. It's probably overdue, but I think in recent years it's become more topical online. And I put Ryan and Shane as a pair.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Apparently, Ryan was invited to do Exes 1 because they wanted to balance out having the female team. But I think now, I mean, they hang out with each other. They post pictures on Instagram. Like, they're cool. So we know that they had a relationship. They've admitted to it. And I think now is the time to kind of talk about that and bring it to the surface.
Yeah, it's funny. They kind of didn't acknowledge it for years, but now are finally leaning into it. Maybe because of social media being more popular. I don't know. But yeah, that's a good shout there.
Yeah, I think that there have been long periods of time where both of them have been off of social media.
Mm-hmm.
And then Shane came back. So Shane was off for a long period of time, came back to do Invasion, Final Reckoning, that stretch. And Ryan wasn't as visible in the franchise. And then Ryan came back when Shane was banned or whatever you want to call it. But now they're both there. They season 40 and All Stars 5, they are relevant, same time. So we can talk about it.
Well, since you talked about a same-sex pairing, I'm going to go ahead and do one right now. And this is going to be a controversial one, but it's one that has taken up both seasons and online steam over the years for the better part of 7 years now, and was pretty much what I would define as the most talked about storyline of All Stars 4, Laurel and Nicole. They would be a really tough team, really tough. Possibly even a threat to win, dare I say. Which not necessarily something I would advocate for, but I just got to call things how I see it. They would probably make they would make the final. I think they would.
Yeah, I had that team as well. I went into this thinking that there has to be one big team that lures people in. And I think that if we got Laurel and Nicole together on the season, they would be that big team. And I know a lot of people don't like watching this storyline get beaten to death, but it would be the main storyline, I'm sure, if they were on the season together. I think that they would get really far. And I think perhaps ironically, you have someone like Rachel and Anissa, they're going to really advocate for the LGBT couples to work together. I think if, at least my scenario, we have Laurel and Nicole and Ryan and Shane, Laurel is just going to try and get Ryan right out of the show. And they're going to...
Well, you know what's interesting about those two same-sex pairings is that they can't stand each other. Shane and Nicole hate each other, too. And
that's true.
Ryan and Laurel hate each other. So, it's perfect.
I would love it.
The defining storyline of an Exes season is that only same-sex teams despise one another.
Yeah. I mean, we want the drama, and they bring the drama. Although there was a part of me that wanted to put Rachel and Jenn, but it's just never gonna, like, that's too fantasy.
Yeah.
Like, I can stretch the illusion to cast people that, like Jamie and Julie, because there's some interest there, but Jenn just would not be there to be with Rachel. Not going to happen.
Yeah, that makes my Jenn and Pete thing even more fantasy. However, it's not necessarily like it's pretty fantasy, except for the fact that Pete's openly said like that he would do it if they called. So the ball's he's literally a phone call away, and Jenn, as far as we know, prior to this pregnancy, was on the phone with them working out the logistics, and it just didn't happen. So
yeah, I get the impression if Jen's going to do it, she wouldn't have a huge issue with being with Pete.
Yeah.
I think she'd have an issue with Rachel.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. I'll go ahead with another pairing here. This one's a bit more harmless, but mainly just because I want these two people on the season. And based on what I'm hearing about Dario, he happens to have quite a messy season this upcoming All-Stars 5, so probably warrants a callback in my universe. I got him with Kellyanne. They had a short, brief, like, whatever you want to call it, during Bloodlines. And they're both obviously in different places in their lives, so none of that's going to be a factor. Simply put them here as a strong team, and because I like them both, so.
I did not have either of those two on my cast, so I love it. It's great. Big fan of both of them. So
I was very close to putting Kellyanne and Wes, but I genuinely believe Wes is retired. I mean, he could come back. Like, retirements in the challenge are about as loose can get, but I tend to believe him this time around. And I tried to, like, reach a bit further into the deeper cuts rather than go for the low-hanging fruit on this one, but I wouldn't complain seeing them together.
The funny thing is, I don't think Wes is retired. I don't believe him. But for some reason, that relationship just completely slipped my mind. And all I could think of for Wes that he hasn't done already, well, Johanna's not coming back. So I'm thinking like Wes and Simone from Rivals 3, which never happened. But I don't know why this hated me. Simone was just like, oh, I have a crush on you. And Wes is like, this always happens to me.
Yeah, I'm trying to think now. I think that was, I mean, it was just Teresa, Johanna, Kellyanne.
Mandy.
Right. And we already saw Mandy and Teresa. And we're never going to see Johanna. And we could see Kellyanne, but,
They would be a great pairing. But going back to Rivals 3, I do have another pairing that originated on Rivals 3.
I know what you mean.
I'm sure you do, because it is Cousin Jamie and Ashley.
I have them as well.
That is one of my favorite relationships that ever came on the show, because it is just so funny. It is the dumbest storyline in the best way. Like, every time I watch it, there's just like another little comment or something that someone says that makes it funnier.
Yeah, I have them as well, simply because it's an unconventional pairing. Like, there's very low-hanging fruits with Ashley because she's appeared on the show so many times, whereas Jamie would be one of those out-of-nowhere returns that, like, you look at the spoiler day of departure and then, like, their name pops up and you're like, oh, like, you have, like, a nostalgia attack. Like, that's kind of what my logic was here, and, like, I don't know, maybe they'd be a pretty good pairing. I mean, technically in the record books, they're both champions. So, yeah, I mean, Ashley obviously has no shortage of potential options, but I chose Jamie here because, a little bit more on the intriguing side. I've got 2 pairings left to go through. How many do you have that you haven't already listed off?
I have 4.
4, okay. Okay, so I guess you could just list off who you could go 2 pairs that you didn't say yet, just so that we both get down to 2 each. And
Sure. So one pair that I have is one that I think has been asked for a long time. And like during the Final Reckoning era, it might have been too fresh and they would not have worked together. But I think now they're probably in a good spot, and that is Cory and Kailah from Invasion. There's a part of me that would love to see Cory and Cheyenne together because they're like co-parents, and they actually, I don't watch Teen Mom because I don't have that little of a life, but I think that they co-parent pretty well together, and I think that would be like a nice positive storyline to see them work well together, but I'm not convinced that Cheyenne would do well in any of the challenges. Kailah, on the other hand, probably would. So I think that would be a great pair.
So you mean to tell me you don't want Mikey P to make his long-awaited debut on...
Well, no. Well, of course I would.
Do you remember... Do you remember? This is story time, folks. This is stuff of legend that what I'm about to talk about. Do you remember during the spoiler season for Double Agents when I told you that Mikey P was on it, and then you put it on your blog about rumored names, and then he reacted to it on Twitter saying, "Oh, I'm not sure how this rumors started, but." I'm currently not quarantining for the Challenge 36. Sorry for the confusion. And he had to put out an actual statement about it.
Well, to be fair, I had heard the name Mike floating around. Yeah. I don't know Mike who. It could have just been me, but I heard the name Mike. But it was a rumor. I never said anything more. I said it's not confirmed, and you were just a little troll. What can you do?
That provided me with entertainment for a week. I could not stop laughing about that. The fact that he actually had to go and make a public statement about it was just like...
Bless him.
Yeah.
Speaking of entertainment, I think that the next pairing I have is probably one of the most entertaining people on the Challenge franchise, and that is Emmanuel, who has lots of options, but I went with Michele. Because Michele is, according to Bananas, soon to be Devin's ex-girlfriend, but she's defied the odds, and they're still together, so I can't do Michele and Devin. And I couldn't think of a viable ex to have Devin on the show, so he's not even on the cast.
Really? You couldn't think of a viable one for Devin? Actually, he's not on mine either, but I did have an option for him, but the way it all trickled out, I had to leave him in my honorable mentions category. I had him and Marie, potentially.
Oh. Yeah.
And,
all I could think of for him was Camilla.
Yeah.
But I wasn't going to put Camilla on the cast, so...
Yeah, I toyed with putting Devin and Marie on. I also, believe it or not, toyed with the idea of putting Michele and Callum on, but I couldn't in good faith put Callum on an all-star season. I know, I just couldn't do it. If it was the flagship and it was Exes, I would do it, but I can't put Callum. I gotta draw the line somewhere. I'm and I didn't even, think he was a bad cast member. It's not that. It's just, when we start letting everybody that's new on All Stars, it's kind of you have to have some level of credibility as you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I toyed with the idea of putting debuts on this, but I was no, this is All Stars. Not going to do it. I would have put Callum, but
I didn't even think he was a bad cast member. I just didn't want him to be on All Stars. And him and Michele definitely would suffice. So we're each down to 2 each. So I'll go ahead and go 1, then you, then me, then you, I guess. Sure. So I'll go with another new pairing. This is going to be Johnny Middlebrooks and Nurys. two people who I think in their own right, individually as cast members, are great additions to cast. I feel like Johnny Middlebrooks definitely should have been on 39, and it was kind of weird that he wasn't. By all accounts, it seemed like he got dropped or something like that, which is, I feel like, a weird decision, and I'm not really sure like the thought process behind it. But I think that he's kind of what the show's missing in terms of new cast members, somebody who's there to compete and can be a pretty good competitor while also being messy. So I think that he would be a great addition to the cast, and then obviously we all know what Nurys brings to the table. So I think them together would be like a really sneaky, strong pairing. And then obviously there's some. I mean, she's with Horacio now, so but they definitely had something on 38, her and him.
Oh yeah, for sure, and that's all pre-Horacio, at least pre the relationship with Horacio. But I like that pairing. Johnny Middlebrooks is someone that's had like a real rough shake getting onto the show. Like I think he was an alternate or quarantined or did something for Spies, Lies, and Allies. He was an alternate or did something for USA One. Then he got on Ride or Dies, and then he got dropped from 39.
It's weird that he got on out of all of those, that Ride or Dies was the one that they chose him for, which feels like such a that would feel like the least one that you would want him for, especially when you consider him and Ravens like
they know each other.
Basically, I mean, speaking of Raven, I didn't put her on this. I toyed with the idea of putting her in Kieran. From 39, I toyed with that idea, and also Raven and Emmanuel as well, but I didn't do that because, again, not really Raven, but like the guys, like I was just like, do I really want to put Kieran? Kind of the same reason as Callum. Like I was like, do I need to put him on an All-Star season? But yeah.
So the other person in that duo, Nurys, I have in the mix for my last pairings. And the reason I say it that way is because one of my potential ideas, pairings, was Tori and Jordan, but it's a little overpowered.
I know where this is going.
And
I kind of like it.
Yeah, it's a little overpowered, and we've seen them work together so many times since being on, or since their breakup, that it's almost not fun. Like they were just on Era 3 together on Battle of the Eras. They did the World Championship, and they proved that there is no relationship more sacred than being ex-fiancés. So I just have a hard time putting them as a teammate or as a pairing, because I don't see what they're going to bring that we haven't seen before. So I put Nurys and Jordan, which I think would be a really solid team. She hasn't won yet. She should have, but she hasn't won yet. So it's not like an overpowered pairing. And I think that, Jordan and Horacio are cool. I don't think it would be like there'd be like a hard stop with them working together. So I think that would be a good pair. And then in doing that, it frees up Tori. Tori, I would put with my boy Faisal. So,
oh wow, that's a good one actually.
Yeah, they went on vacation together. It was so romantic, but somehow it didn't work out. So that would be the end of my cast. Those two, I think Tori and Fessy together would be a strong team.
Well, I do agree with that. I actually did cross my mind for a bit. But it's fitting that I have one more pairing left, and it's also fitting that they're saved for last here, because this one's going to be incredibly controversial, possibly the most controversial statement that I've ever made since doing these podcasts.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's so great. Yeah. Way to throw myself under the bus on a random Thursday night. However, whatever. Since we know that All Stars is basically their way to kind of ingratiate people back into the franchise, I figured that in recent years, one of the kind of Exes pairs that took up big storylines on seasons and kind of left un like the strings were kind of left like unattached, whatever. Um, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. I put Rogan and Dee on my cast.
Oh yeah,
It is what it is.
I would love to see that. I think that together they would be a really solid pairing, but do I see it happening realistically? Probably not.
I could see maybe like them being put together on their first season back is like it's probably near impossible. And I would say out of the two, Rogan would have a better shot of coming back than Dee probably, but it would most likely be by himself for at least first. If they both get brought back on separate occasions and then an Exes season happens, then maybe they could put them together once they've both been ingratiated back. I kind of feel like we never see Dee again.
I feel like Dee probably would not put herself in the situation to be back. She would probably elect not to return if she was invited. I don't know. I think Rogan would. It would be great business for his OnlyFans if he came back onto the show. So he probably isn't out of the realm of possibilities, but this pairing, I think, would be really hard to integrate into the show because I think the last moments of it are on Total Madness and got edited out.
Which I'm sure that footage exists still somewhere in their archives.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever saw episode 13, the Canadian version that wasn't.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so different, and it has the moments where Rogan is giving, I think, Bananas permission to throw Dee into the elimination against Maddie. So I would love to see it unearth some of the buried footage from Total Madness, but I don't know. You definitely sent me down a rabbit hole. Not the most controversial statement I've ever heard, but
I just thought that they were one of the more intriguing Exes pairs in terms of like taking up big storylines on seasons, and they're both in their own right, regardless of what both of them might have said that might have been insensitive over the years. I think if you're just being objective, they were both good additions to the show, and I feel like they would both be good additions to the cast. And now I got to preface by saying, like, I don't condone necessarily their insensitivity, but you know, you got to call a spade here. Like, they've been very forgiving of people who have done worse in my eyes and who are still on the show. So, I mean, if that's going to be their stance, then for what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong kind of thing. It was my logic here. Like, you know, so that's why I ultimately did this. I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that what Dee or even Rogan, for that matter, said should be, you know, excused in any way. But what I'm saying is, if they're going to take the stance and, you know, have others who have done far worse, you know, kind of get brought back, then they should be able to bring them back as well. So
yeah, I mean, I'm with you there. Like, I'm never going to defend them, but also, if you wanted people who said smarter things, you wouldn't be casting reality stars on this show.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know if people know this or not, but reality stars are not known for being the smartest people in the world. So I think that they've given more grace to people who deserve it less.
Mm-hmm. I had a couple more honorable mentions. I had Laurel and Josh would have been another one because I just think it would be funny.
Sure.
And then this one was another shot in the dark, like really super fantasy here, and it probably would never happen. I had Dunbar and Kim. But that would have been more realistic, like back in like 2012 on like Exes 1 or something, but
Yeah.
we already got Dunbar and Paula, so.
I will say, I had a very hard time making this cast without Nelson. Realistically, I wasn't going to include him, but I think I could have made a cast of 14 teams where they all had a female, and Nelson was the partner.
I mean, in a world in which he would have been eligible, I mean, you got him and Ashley, him and Berna, him and Angela. Which, honestly, gun to head, I might have went with him and Angela.
Yeah. I would probably go with him and Kelly, but...
yeah. Mm-hmm.
The options are limitless. I mean, plus he did, like, Are You the One? X on the Beach. So he's got options. There were a few people where I just could do the whole cast with their exes. Like, some people had so many options.
Yeah, I'm actually going to throw one your way right now. Obviously, we just talked about controversial details. This person themselves didn't do anything wrong. However, they're kind of caught up in the mix of a situation that clearly the network would want to stray away from, which is obviously the Bear situation. Georgia would technically be eligible to be partnered up with Josh if they wanted to bring her back. Because Josh and her had a little thing on War of the Worlds too. And I feel like Georgia was like one of the better, like, newer additions to the franchise. However, given like the whole like circumstance of what happened in the recent years with like her and like that whole Bear situation, I don't know. I feel like do you feel like they would ever take a chance on bringing her back again?
I do. I think that I don't think that she's a hardcore off the show. I think that she has other opportunities. But I think that she's not that this is an MTV show, and I don't even think it's in the Viacom universe, but I believe she was on Love Island All-Stars in the UK. And this was last year, maybe.
Okay, so she's still like within the network.
Yeah, she's still active in reality television, and as we all know, Challenge fans love watching international reality shows on networks that they can't feasibly obtain in the US. So we all are watching Georgia on Love Island UK All-Stars.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, I'm kind of a proponent at this point of bringing back people who showed promise as cast members. I'm not talking like competitively, because I'm just simply talking like you got to be like a little bit more well-rounded for my taste. Like, it's one thing to be a good competitor, but I need somebody like a Georgia, even a Dee, like I mentioned, Rogan, Johnny Middlebrooks. Like, we need some more like people like that in order to, like, I guess, keep the franchise like alive and fresh. So.
Yeah, I think that Georgia was one of those people that was a great asset to the show because she overreacted to everything. Mm-hmm. Kind of like if you ever watch a trailer, Anissa or Tori in every single trailer will have a shocked face at one point. Like, it's not even a question of if, it's when. When will you see them gasping at some announcement that TJ made? And usually when we get to the actual show, it's like such a minor thing that they're shocked at. But Georgia overreacted to the extent that...
Hers was real. Hers was definitely real, Georgia's. Like,
maybe.
I don't know. She seemed like genuinely, like, just... I don't want to say delusional, but, like, she just genuinely seemed like in her own kind of, like... similar to Emmy, actually, from Spies, Lies, and Allies. But that's another discussion. I'm actually, she's somebody who I'm actually fine with not coming back.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched Spies, Lies, and Allies since, and I get the appeal of her more on the second watch of it, but it's no hard loss.
Well, because when I tuned into I think I might have tuned into maybe like the first episode of Spies, Lies, and Allies, and I would see clips here and there, and I knew from afar she kept winning eliminations. Mm-hmm. I like thought like, oh, okay, she's gonna be like one of the newer people for the future, like that's gonna keep coming back and be one of the figure points in the show. But nah, I think I'm good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the one person from Spies, Lies, and Allies that has become a figure on the show is Michele. She won that lottery. So,
Yeah, let's hope Michaela can get added to the mix soon.
yeah, she could. I feel like she could, but she declines sometimes.
Well, she's got a life, so.
Well, that's more than you can have if you want to be a challenger. It's like the Venn diagram. Having a life.
Have a life, don't have a life, somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. You can't have.
Yeah. Well, all right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Exes. Well, not really another Exes. The Exes fantasy casting for All Stars. This is our only time we've ever done this. So let us know either on Twitter or down in this comment section below what type of video you'd want to see us do next. Like I said in the beginning, All Stars Rivals is premiering in 6 days from now. So actually, well, it'd probably be about 5 days from now, given the fact that I'm probably not dropping this until tomorrow, and we're recording this on a Thursday, but you get the point. Next Wednesday, the 29th, on MTV. It's not on Paramount. It's probably useful information right there to let the masses know where they could watch this.
Yeah, so Paramount's 10 subscribers doesn't tune into MTV.
Well, 9, because I just ended mine. But but yeah, no, thank you guys for tuning in to another episode. And until next time, see you guys.
See you later.